So, welcome. Thank you all for coming along. Today is quite important for us because potentially in less than 2 weeks' time, we could be receiving an Ofsted call and having an Ofsted inspection. So this is to give you the opportunity to try and make sure everybody's clear on where we're at and what we're doing. So we'll make a start in a moment. Here we go. Some people start to come in. We'll just have to slow down a bit just to let a few more people in. But we're going to look a little bit first at the unseen observations. But just to, first of all, to start off by saying we're in a really strong position. A huge thank you. If Ofsted do arrive, then a lot of what we're doing and all the success that we're having is down to you. So thank you so much for everything that you've done to date. The earliest that they could call us is next Wednesday, and that would mean that they would then be arriving a week on Monday, and then on. It's a weekly wait to Wednesday, and once we get past about Wednesday lunchtime, if we get the call, if we haven't had the call by then we know we're safe for another week. We're not actually expected to be top of the priority list, but we are due an inspection at some point. This could be any point in the next fortnight onwards. But our main focus this afternoon really is just to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn book. So if they do visit, then we'll all be talking about the same thing. So just something for you to have a quick look at, which is the unseen observations that took place last term. This was a really, really successful and useful process. Despite us not being able to come into schools to visit you, we actually found it really useful to do that triad conversation with yourselves and the associate teachers and us. And some things emerged from that mostly was really, really positive. But I think the key driver here is to make sure that the associate teacher is the one that is being able to be reflective and identifying improvements themselves towards the lessons that they've planned, rather than waiting for us to and tell them what it is that they need to do to change. So there's some questions there that I won't go through, but just to let you have a read on the screen of some of the types of things that you might want to be asking in pre-lesson dialogues to help prompt them to reflect themselves. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a quick look at those. It's completely appropriate after our initial discussions with them to offer suggestions about how to tweak or reformat things to ensure a better outcome before they actually go to deliver the lesson, and to try to link that to cognitive science and our own subject pedagogies and whole school approaches is really useful as well. And we wouldn't have expected those pre-lesson dialogues to go on any longer than about 20 minutes. In terms of after post-lesson dialogues, it's really, again, the same thing to encourage the associate teachers to reflect on how the lessons went and identify their own next action step. So it's really important that they're developing those reflective practitioner skills that we want them to do as they move into their NQT year and beyond. But quite often they sit back and want us to tell them all the answers to the questions, when really we want them to be thinking for themselves. So that's something that as learning coaches we need to try to hold back from and try to ask them more prompt questions to get them to come up with the answers for themselves. But really then it's about narrowing that down to 2 or 3 key elements that you really want to talk about, rather than go through the whole lesson frame by frame, trying to think about what is the key lever or the key driver that's going to make them progress the most on a weekly basis. And then, of course, you've obviously got your lesson observation form that you would have filled in. So it's a time really for them to really focus on that discussion rather than reading through the form, because the form is something that they can read themselves afterwards. So the message here really is to try to focus on what the key lever is to move them forward in their next set of lessons. But it was a really good experience, and I think it was something that we'll look to continue to do next year, to work more closely with you on that. And then when we had the professional reviews, which we've just been conducting before Easter and a few this week, They've been really positive. It's been really nice to hear the associate teachers speak so articulately about cognitive science, their own subject pedagogy, and the wonderful support that they're having from you. A couple of things that did crop up is some of the weaker areas that they haven't really got a lot of evidence for, which is the effective use of teaching assistants, liaising with parents. That's something that a lot of them haven't had opportunities to do. So if we could try to focus on them enabling ways of gathering evidence to fulfill those, that would be really good in the next few weeks. And then their evidence on adaptive teaching. Out of those 5 key strands that we use on the course, this was a weaker area in terms of their evidence, the quality of evidence. So I'll mention something about that a bit later on during this session. But we have to get them to dig a little bit deeper with that as we head towards the end of the course. This is just a reminder that the coaching materials that we've presented this year, in October, we did a session about powerful action steps that Joe ran and introduced the concept of instructional coaching. And as learning coaches, that is the buzzword really that when Ofsted come, we use an instructional coaching approach with our associate teachers. And if you want a reminder of that session, it is on YouTube and I've put the link here for you. It's based upon session number 4 of 5 videos that are on the online platform. And so again, if you want to go back and refresh your memory about some of those principles, those 5 videos are online for you. You've already pretty much looked at number 4. If you're a new learning coach, the first 1 and 2 about levels of listening and active listening skills, and then the concept of see it, name it, do it, and trying to find that particular one lever that is going to help move an associate teacher forward. That is sort of the basics of instructional coaching, those first 2 videos. For people that are a bit more experienced, you might want to have a look at what's called 3-point communication, which is about trying to become a better coach by being a bit more hands-off and facilitating more of a dialogue rather than telling them what to do better. And then deliberate rehearsal is the other video that you might want to look at. But they're all there for you to dip into as you choose. And they're on the online platform, like I say, and they're each about 20 to 30 minutes each. So just a couple of key messages about learning coaches' roles. And again, this is really in case Ofsted do come along. What we're looking for is coaching approach rather than mentoring. So our emphasis is on dialogue and enabling associate teachers to form their own reflections and to come up with their own targets, which then as a coach, we're just refining that target and reframing it as necessary. And I've mentioned this before about our instructional coaching approach, finding the most important lever rather than trying to fix every problem in one go. It's really pulling out the most important thing that's going to give them the most opportunity to make progress using these, what we call see it, name it, do it, and powerful action steps. Then, of course, we've got the Teach Toolkit, which I hope you're all familiar with now, and that is being revamped for next year to become a bit more user-friendly. But what it allows us to do is to focus the target setting each week on particular things that they've been having training on recently. So we have a centralized target. We also have the opportunity to develop a personal target, which is formed because of what's emerged from their focused lesson observations that they've had that week. And what we're aiming for is for those targets to have a subject-specific pedagogy element to them, which is something, again, we've talked about before. Initial teacher training now has become very much subject pedagogy based. So our generic training has become less important and our subject specific training has actually become more important. So our target setting, where we can, needs to be linked to the subject that they're teaching or the phase that they're teaching if it's in primary. So what we're looking at next year is trying to, rather than do meetings like this where it's a lot of information giving and a lot of admin, we're trying to move to more what we're going to do in the second part of this afternoon for a lot of the subject routes, and try and do work in smaller groups, in subject groups, to emphasise our subject specific pedagogy. So a lot of the information giving next year we'll try to do by narrated PowerPoints, and you can watch those at your leisure. We've also been asked, in terms of survey from the learning coach survey that you did, that you would like some more support and development in ways to effectively observe lessons and ways to write up lesson observations, and to look at examples of really good and not so good coaching conversations. So we're going to look at that for next year. So we're moving more to a bit more of a flexible training approach, because some of you have been coaches quite a long period of time, and some of you are doing this for the first time this year, hopefully, and beyond as well. Okay, so again, key messages from us in terms of Ofsted, in terms of our course structure. One thing that comes through very, very clearly in the Ofsted inspection framework is about what they call purposeful integration. And that means that we are deliberately designing our course to integrate our centre-based training, what's happening in school placements with you, and target setting, and how that all ties in together into an integrated course. I'm not going to go through this in detail because you've seen it before, but the key thing here is that we work in 3 blocks of placements over the course of the year, and we move from starting off with core concepts of teaching and learning in the first term, and then we start to look at experimenting with different pedagogies. And then in this term, where we are now, we're looking at a bit more of a detailed justification and evaluation of their own pedagogies and theories that they're using. So we have 3 stages of learning. We also have 3 key areas of focus in each of these terms. The first term, we're focusing very much on cognitive science, engagement, planning, and behaviour. In primary, we're very much focused on early reading and early mathematics. And then in the second term, between Christmas and Easter, we're looking at emphasising developments in assessment and in adaptive teaching. And then now in this term, what we're looking at is a deeper meeting of all of the teacher standards, and really having high quality lessons throughout. So this is how the purposeful integration works. And we're hoping that our target setting, the work that they're doing in schools, what lesson feedback they're getting, and what training they're getting from us all ties in and follows those 3 stages of learning and 3 key areas to develop. And this again is something that you've seen before. This is the secondary version, but there is a primary version of this as well, in that we have what we've called key strands, which you'll see on the lesson plan and you'll see on the lesson observation, where we've split the teacher standards into different key strands, which is planning and engagement and cognitive science, which we focus on first, and behaviour. And then the second term, like I've said, we look at assessment and we look at adaptive teaching. And our training is spiralled so that we have an initial training across all of those things. And then as we start to go further into the year, we start to funnel down and then revisit some of these ideas again and again. So we're retrieving and going back to principles that we've taught them at the beginning of the course. So like I said, primary is very similar to this. We still have the same key strands. We have these themes within our course, these key strands, and we have this spiral approach. And we also try to link that to the school training that the professional coaches in secondary are delivering as well. Okay, just a bit about the core content framework. If working in initial teacher training is something that you want to get more involved in, I would certainly suggest you read and digest this document. It's new and it's a compulsory statutory framework for initial teacher training that came into force in September. And the way it works, it's still set up against the teacher standards, but we approach that and we make sure that all of this core content is covered using our key strands that I've just talked about. But the important thing about it, and Richard Gill, who's the CEO for the ATLP, was involved in the development of this. It's set against the teacher standards, but it's also worded in learn that, which is all the things that they have to learn, and then learn how to do things. And several key phrases come up again and again, which is about expert input. And that expert can be you, it can be another teacher who's an expert in that field in your school, it could be one of our team delivering the training. But expert input is something that comes through again and again, and also the opportunity to practice. And that can be practicing things outside of the classroom, but it's also practicing in the classroom too. and then of course receiving feedback and then improving over time. So none of this is really rocket science, but it does refer to these expert colleagues who are helping to train. You have the opportunity, providing the opportunity to observe expert colleagues in practice, and then having those discussions with you as expert colleagues and getting them to really analyse and reflect on what they're doing. But I just wanted to show you that if you would like to have a look at it, that would be useful. It's got some really good links into it as well. So if, for example, behaviour management is an issue for one of your associate teachers, you could look at Standard 7 and you'd see links there to a lot of resources that you might want to direct them to or have a look at yourself if you're struggling to find ways to move them forwards. But our responsibility as a provider is to make sure that we have fulfilled everything that's in this document. And if we haven't fulfilled everything in this document, we would be classed as requires improvement in an Ofsted inspection at best. So I said I'd come back to adaptive teaching, and what that is obviously one of our key strands that we were focusing on last term. And some of the core content framework refers very strongly towards the emphasis on considering SEND students and considering disadvantaged as well. It does say that there's no real need to go into huge amounts of detail about every type of special educational need, because what we should be emphasising, and you'll know this from the SEN Code of Conduct, is that we should be focusing on quality first teaching and making sure that what we're doing is supporting every student in our classroom. So when we talk about adaptive teaching, what we're thinking about is differentiation by task, outcomes, support, different things that we're doing to adapt to different circumstances. With COVID, we'd also count about how we've adapted our approaches to provide effective teaching in the current situation that we've been in the last 12 months. But again, the emphasis is on quality first teaching. It does talk about the 4 main areas of special educational need, which I've snapshotted on the right hand side for you, which is communication and interaction, cognition and learning, SEMH, and sensory and physical needs. And they do have training in those areas. On the secondary course, to just remind you some of the training sessions that they've had in the first term. They've had training about universal provision, quality first teaching, waves of intervention, and SEND legislation in general. They've done some research about common SEND conditions, and they've had sessions on how to ensure challenge and progression for both low attainers, and then another session for higher attainers as well. They've had a session on language acquisition and English as an additional language. And then the second term, they've had level 1 autism awareness training, which is a certified course from the City Council. They've had a session hosted by Stockland Green School about closing the gap and supporting pupil premium students. They've had some practical EAL strategies as well, and some practical SEND strategies training last term. And then this Friday, they're going to have some support in how to best work with visually impaired learners, and that's been hosted by Plantsbrook School. So we're looking forward to that. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that we've done in terms of formal training, but their evidence of this really needs to cover a lot of these things when they come towards collating that evidence for the end of the course. The last couple of bits is about something else in the core content framework that comes through strongly, which is about making sure we're best preparing associate teachers to support students with their mental health. That's obviously been really important this year more than ever before, but making sure that there's a culture of respect and students feel motivated and valued. And obviously we're looking for that ethos in our schools and in our classes. The framework really highlights the importance of building positive relationships with pupils and parents as a way of enabling students to all achieve. So in terms of what we've done on our course, we've had sessions on behaviour management where we've looked at basic rules and routines and building relationships with students. We've done specific sessions about how to emotion coach students, and the impact of adverse childhood experiences on students' learning. And we've also looked at restorative conversations and ways of resolving or rebuilding relationships with students when they've deteriorated. We have looked as well at providing guidance for associate teachers about how to support themselves, but also how to support students during this really difficult period of lockdown and remote teaching. And finally, just to remind you that you can access the course handbook and all of the training sessions that we run. So all of the PES sessions that were on that spiral, all of the subject specific sessions are all available online on the online platform. And if you go onto the Learning Coach page, you can now access all of those sessions. So if you think from what we've said today, that you don't know very much about English as an additional language teaching, then you might want to have a look at those PowerPoints and resources that are there for you. And so at past, which is 7 minutes away, the vast majority of subject groups are going to be meeting for the next half an hour to look at how the subject specific aspect of the course works. For primary, I believe you have a second session with Jane on Thursday, and some subject groups might be doing their second session at a different time. But for secondary subjects, we have a whole intent statement for the SCITT overall. We have a curriculum intent statement as well, but then we also have an intent statement for each secondary subject. So if you're a primary colleague, you are welcome to leave the meeting now, because there's nothing more to give, unless information to give you, unless there's anything you want to put into the chat. Obviously, I'll make sure this recording and PowerPoint is available to you, but I hope you've found this useful to just give you an idea of the kind of framing of where we're at with the course. So if the inspectors do call, that you're using some of these terms and that you're familiar with the processes that we use. So I hope this has been useful. We'll just give a quick look at the chat. Thank you very much. Okay. So for secondary colleagues, there's one more slide just to show you, which is when we asked all our subject pedagogy leads to come up with a subject intent. So what the whole point of the history course is about, what the whole point of the science course is about. What we found is that there's a lot of commonality between them. So we pulled out all the things that were common to all of the different secondary subjects and made a general subject intent statement. And this is it. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to have a quick read through. So every subject at secondary is committed to following these principles here. So if you want to just have a quick read of that now. So you can see some of the things at the bottom, particularly about the things that we actually do. So we're looking at providing them with reading and tasks, having a good diet of subject content and helping them improve subject knowledge, but also subject specific pedagogy. And that's delivered through training with us, but also with you on a day-to-day basis, about coaching, looking at making sure that they can learn from each other, making sure that we've got coherency again and this purposeful integration with the generic training that we do on Friday mornings, and how we use that common language and how we use these cognitive science terms and things like that, and how that meshes together with the subject specific training that they have, and also ways of promoting scholarship in their own subjects as well, through signposting further reading and research and evidence-based practice that's up to date. We look at developing their subject knowledge through auditing and target setting in terms of improving their subject knowledge and understanding the curriculum as well in their own subjects, alongside literacy and numeracy, and then the more digital applications, which has been particularly important this year, hasn't it, in terms of Zoom. I think I'm very au fait with Zoom now. And Teams. So what will happen now is that we'll lead into the subject sessions. If you're a science learning coach, please stay on this meeting, because we're just going to carry on here. If you're a learning coach in the other subjects, again, a huge thank you. If we do get the call, you'll know as soon as we know, and then we'll be able to provide you with some more information. But I hope this has been helpful to you, just for this half an hour burst of framing where we're at. So feel free to sign out when you are ready, and if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to contact me and I'll try to help. But thank you for your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, science people, it won't be a moment. Thanks, Vic, that's no problem at all. You can leave now when you're ready.
I do not need to stay on for the subject specific thing.
This is for science. So
sorry.
It's all right. Has Vic contacted you about
No.
yours? Oh, okay. What she might, I'm not sure if she's in at the moment, but she will. So you can have an early dart. And
that'll be another day, will it?
yeah, she'll get in touch with you and sort that out. Okay.
Sorry again. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Right. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second.